We have first our keynote speech by Gordon Chang, who many of you know is a columnist and author, a frequent guest on Fox News and other news shows of various networks, on the John Batchelor radio show, which he sometimes guest hosts. I should mention, Gordon is the author of 2 books. One is an earlier one, The Coming Collapse of China, and also The Nuclear Showdown, which you obviously can order.
It's an honor for my wife and I to be here today. There is one question that each of us must ask. In a year from now, will the Republic of Korea, South Korea, still be a liberal democracy? Or maybe we should ask another question. Maybe we should ask, will there even be a South Korea then? Today, we all know that Kim regime, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, is threatening to take over South Korea. But we also know that the Kim family, grandfather, son, now the grandson, have always threatened South Korea. So the question is, what's different now? What's different now is that South Korea has a leader who is subverting his own society. Moon Jae-in, as we've just heard, is trying to undermine the whole notion of liberal democracy. He is jailing his opponents. He is muzzling North Korean defectors. He is allowing pro-North Koreans to run around and have the free reign of South Korean society. He's taking down barriers to North Korea infiltration and invasion. We know that he's whitewashing North Korea. And of course, he wants to unify with North Korea, perhaps on Kim family terms. Moon Jae-in, in short, is dangerous. He's dangerous to his own country. If his goal were to help Kim Jong-un take over North Korea, he would be doing exactly what he's doing today. Kim Jong-un has no better friend than the president of South Korea. Let us look what happened when Moon traveled to Pyongyang last month to meet with Kim Jong-un. Kim had arranged about 100,000 North Koreans to greet the South Korean president. And the North Koreans were waving flags. They were waving either the flag of North Korea or the blue and white unification standard. What they were not waving, not one of them waved the South Korean flag. Moon Jae-in just didn't seem to mind about that at all. Matter of fact, the only South Korean flag was on the lapel of Samsung's Lee Jae-yong, who accompanied Moon. But that's it. And Jay, thank you very much for the flag. What we saw in Pyongyang was Moon trying to downplay the legitimacy of the government that he leads and even downplay the existence of the state that he was elected to represent. So let's look at what Moon actually said when he was in North Korea. And pardon me for my pronunciation. Moon on the trip often used the phrase Namchuk, literally south side or south, when the custom has been for South Korean presidents to refer to it Hongkong, literally the country of Han people. Similarly, Moon, when he was in North, said Namchuk Gukmin, that translates as South Side citizens. South Korean presidents would normally say Ori Gukmun, literally our citizens, or figuratively my citizens. In contrast, Kim Jong-un did not return the favor. When he talked about these things, he only used the communist term Ori Inmin, our people or my people. Moon's choice of words clearly indicated that he was subtly, but nonetheless significantly, he was not asserting the right of South Korea to exist. Now, Moon obviously wants to change that position, which has been core to South Korea's existence since its founding in August of 1948. So, for instance, recently his Ministry of Education has disturbingly changed the textbooks. Up to now, South Korea's textbooks have said that Seoul, quote, is the only legitimate government on the Korean peninsula. New textbooks, those authorized by Moon, do not include that phrase. Also, the Unification Ministry's training materials no longer include that important declaration. Now, to pave the way for unification, which is obviously Moon's cherished goal, he's also tried to make South Korea more compatible with Kim Jong-un's North Korea. Most fundamentally, the Democratic Party of Korea, Moon's party, led an attempt to remove the concept of liberal from democratic in the South Korean constitution. Now, fortunately, South Korea's conservatives were able to rebuff that effort, but the Education Ministry in June of this year tried to change the country's textbooks again to eliminate the concept of liberal from the concept of democracy. The ministry had to relent in some respects, but nonetheless we can see what Moon is trying to do. Moreover, Moon's government has given only a lukewarm endorsement to the National Community Unification Formula, which has been endorsed by every South Korean president since 1989. And that formula affirms that a unified Korea should be a liberal democracy. The Kim regime in the North, of course, rejects the term liberal, but it does say it's democratic. And so therefore, what Moon is trying to do is to remove a barrier to unification. Moon Jae-in, unfortunately, in tangible ways, is also undermining democracy. Since becoming president in May of last year, he has used the control of the big broadcasters to muzzle those views that he does not like, and also to promote North Korean views. And as Lawrence Beck has pointed out to me, recently an American expert who was visiting Seoul was warned by a state-funded broadcaster not to voice views of criticism of Moon's approach to North Korea. Now Moon's government is going after free expression on social media. Minju, his political party, has sponsored a broadcast reform bill, as it's called. And that bill, if enacted, would allow the government to take down YouTube videos that it doesn't like. As Ambassador Lee has said, YouTube is a main venue for those who don't share Moon's views. In South Korea, is it really becoming North Korea? Well, it's certainly moving in that direction, because we see that Moon, using the color of law and also insidious means, is actually moving the government to a very coercive position. A favorite tactic has been to use criminal defamation charges against critics. Moreover, the South Korean government is pressuring North Korean defectors to keep quiet about their experiences in North Korea and how they feel about the Kim regime. Conservative voices, Peck says, have been prosecuted, they've been persecuted, they've been pressured, they've been censored, they have been retaliated against, and they've been harassed. And they are not the only ones who have been targeted by this. What we are seeing is North Korean elements in South Korea are starting a reign of terror. And in that reign of terror, the North Korean elements, of course, feel free to speak, and they're denying that same right to others. The North's radical proponents are now holding rallies against what they call are the scum. In other words, those people who left North Korea to live in freedom in the South. Moreover, the radicals have been putting up posters in Seoul, these wanted posters, especially for 2 North Korean defectors. Because these 2 defectors have been targeted for assassination by Pyongyang, what these wanted posters do is it puts their lives in risk. Free democracy, as we now know it, is currently on the verge of collapse, say many people in South Korea. And that's true, because the feeling of alarm is certainly, with justification, widespread in South Korean society. And if all of this were not enough, Moon unilaterally and with agreement by North Korea is now starting to take down the defenses against a North Korean attack, as we just heard from Dave Maxwell. So for instance, he's taking down barbed wire fencing, observation posts, tank traps. He's also proposing a substantial reduction in the size of the South Korean military. Now, you will hear justifications for the reduction of the size of the military, and people say, well, collapsing demography, we don't have the young men who are willing to serve. I'm not buying it. First of all, South Korea's population size has still growing. And clearly what we're seeing is, although it eventually will turn down in several years, it's nonetheless big enough to support the size of the military as it is today. Second, the planned decrease in size of the force of the military is much greater than the projected demographic decline. And third of all, the Moon government is proposing to reduce the period of conscription to 18 months from 21. Reducing the period of conscription is the last thing that a government which is concerned about demography would do. It's the last thing that you would do. I'm forced to one conclusion. I believe that the Moon government does not want South Korea to defend itself. And that conclusion you have to draw when you look at that detailed military agreement that Moon and Kim arrived at last month in Pyongyang. That agreement, of course, takes down a number of South Korean defenses. It certainly favors North Korea more than us. And remember, as Dave pointed out, North Korea is the attacker. We are the defenders. Now, many people speculate as to Moon's motives, but whatever his intention, we have heard from Daniel and from others about Moon's advisors. Many of them who were members of these Juche revolution groups, the Jusapa, and who have refused to disavow their views to this day. And to this day, allegations continue to swirl around Moon's chief of staff, Im Jong-sok. Moon, as Lawrence points out, is still continuing to hire far-left investors. Therefore, Moon's refusal to insist that North Koreans fly their flag, his flag, the South Korean flag during this trip, is disturbing. This is a breach of diplomatic protocol, and any national leader would have insisted that the South Korean flag be flown. As my friend Dave Maxwell says, and sorry to rely too much on you, Dave, but you are the source of my wisdom on this, the North continually attempts to subvert, coerce, and extort South Korea. And now Kim appears to have recruited a sympathizer in the form of the South Korean president. As a result, we all have to be concerned that South Korea is becoming defenseless, under threat from a militant regime. As an initial matter, there's a danger, a real danger, that the United States is just going to get sick and fed up with all that's going on and walk away from South Korea. We know that we have a president who in March of 2016, when he was running for the White House, actually suggested that the United States walk away from not only South Korea, but Japan. But there is real anger in these days, and that anger is justified, as it should be. We've got to remember, go back to the end of October of last year when the South Korean Foreign Ministry issued, in conjunction with the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the infamous 3 no's. Those 3 no's were that South Korea would not allow any more emplacements of the American-built THAAD missile defense system, that South Korea would not participate in any ballistic missile defense system, and that South Korea would not join any tripart alliance with Japan and the United States. Now, there was no or virtually no consultation with Washington before South Korea issued the 3 no's, and that, of course, is inconsistent with South Korea's obligations as a treaty partner. By issuing the 3 no's on missile defense and alliance matters, South Korea essentially told us 2 things. First of all, Seoul was saying that Beijing was more important to South Korea than the United States. And Seoul was saying that although the United States is obligated to defend South Korea, we cannot use certain weapons to do so because China would be angry. Since when did China get a veto over the defense of the Korean Peninsula? Since when do the Chinese get to say what weapons we can use to protect ourselves from a threat that, after all, China has nurtured? And of course, the military pact last month, that too was negotiated and signed without consultation with the United States. So it's not surprising that American officials are a little bit hot under the collar these days, and we turn to what happened this week, which was certainly a diplomatic breach on the part of the United States. South Korea's Foreign Minister Chang just said a couple days ago that no, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was not uncivil to her. Well, I think he probably was, because the reporting also indicates that Pompeo was so upset during a phone call with Minister Chang that he actually hung up. He cooled down and then called her back later. Yeah, it's a diplomatic breach, but I don't blame Pompeo, because I probably would have done the same thing. And maybe, just maybe, what we're seeing is a deliberate strategy on the part of the South Koreans to make the U.S. so upset that we do walk away. Getting America off the peninsula, which is a result of a peace declaration that Moon Jae-in wants, well, what would happen? Yes, immediately after that, you would hear all of those forces that Daniel talked about. They would then say, look, there's no need for American troops anymore. Okay? No American troops, no alliance. What happens? It's what Maxwell talks about. Sorry, Dave. But it's exactly what he'll talk about, and that is North Korea will intimidate South Korea into submission. The danger of Moon's moves, therefore, is the existence of the South Korean state will be ended. There'll be no more free Korea, the better version of Korea. So if South Koreans don't stop their president, then we could see the DPRK in a position to take over the South. And that's not just my view. Kim Jong-un in recent months has been talking more and more about quote-unquote final victory, which is North Korean code for the elimination of the South Korean state. So he's getting optimistic that he, Kim Jong-un, will be able to do what his granddad and his dad was not able to do, which is to absorb South Korea. So what should we do? Well, we need to convince the American public that the Mutual Defense Treaty with South Korea is not just for the benefit of South Korea, but it's also for the benefit of the United States. Why is this the case? Why is it in the interest of the United States? Well, first of all, for more than a century, about a century and a half, American policymakers have drawn their Western defense perimeter, not off the coast of Hawaii, not off the coast of Guam, but off the coast of East Asia. South Korea, which is of course on the continent of East Asia, anchors the northern end of that defense perimeter. And with South Korea in unfriendly hands, it makes Japan, another treaty partner of the US, untenable to defend. Second, we all know that this is a time when democracy, the form of governance, our governance, is under attack by large authoritarian states and under attack by others. We cannot afford to lose any free society, especially a free society as important as South Korea's. All of us, South Koreans and Americans, should continue protesting in Seoul, and we should continue talking to the American public and American policymakers. Americans need to hear that not all South Koreans support their President Moon Jae-in. Americans need to hear that South Koreans want to continue to live in freedom. All of this, of course, is a tall order because, as we've heard so many times today, the media is firmly in the control of Moon Jae-in. Yet this is a struggle that we can win, and it's a struggle that we will have to win. America's security is dependent upon the security of South Korea. South Korea's security is dependent on ours. So for Americans, from our point of view, defending South Korea is defending America. And that's why these conversations, and that's why these months are so important to us, because we may not have much time. So for all that you have done, and all that you will do, I salute you. May we all live in peace, and more important, may we all live in freedom. Thank you.